stress is not like a bacterial infection or E. coli food poisoning. Stress actually is from within the body, but it's a response to an external factor. So can you just unpack a little more acute versus chronic and what's the big deal?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruchika Prakash. I am so honored to be here, and I'm going to answer that question in just one moment. But can we all just agree that COSI is a crowning jewel in Columbus, right? It's amazing. So let's talk about stress. That's what we're here for, right? I really, the way I have been thinking about stress, both in terms of the research that I do, but also I teach, or I don't do that anymore, but I used to teach a health psychology course where we would talk about stress all the time. Stress is a really important response in our bodies, right? It's our body's built-in alarm system. And when you think about evolutionarily, there was a lot of advantage to having this fight or flight response. And in fact, if you think about the history of stress, right, our ancestors, when a wild lion was chasing them, we needed that fight or flight system. So a lot of stress research, when it first started, it really started in response to what are called acute stressors. These are immediate threats in our environment. Thankfully, we don't have lions chasing us anymore, but we have what is called a chronic stress. So I think of acute stress as a sprinter. This is just, a quick thing that our body needs to respond to, and then it's over. So imagine like a roller coaster at Disney World that you go to, and you have the thrill, you're stressed about it, and your fight or flight system kicks in, the adrenaline is going, but it's over. When it comes to chronic stress, that's like that psychological melodrama, so the soap opera that's happening. And when you think about chronic stress, it's usually psychological in nature, right? In our societies and in our modern day society, most of our stressors are psychological. And it's not just in response to when the event is happening, it's in anticipation of that response.
So this is fascinating. So the acute one makes sense. Basically, it saves us from dangerous or precarious situations. But the chronic stress, you said, is psychological. Why do we have that in us in the first place if there's no real great use?
Actually, chronic stress is also good for you, but everything in small doses and in small, in moderation. There's this really interesting study that came out a few years ago. I do a lot of my work with older adults and midlife and older, and I count myself solidly in that category now.
I'm approaching it, unfortunately,
yes,
too.
You don't look a day older than 30.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. So a lot of this research was done with older adults who had retired. And, there is a certain way that society tends to think about older adults who have retired. And there is a significant decline in what we call our brain volume once we take retirement. But this was done at Johns Hopkins University. And what they did was that they took a lot of older adults who had retired and they placed them in libraries to work with at-risk youth. Right, and so when they were first looking at the stress levels in a lot of those older adults, they were understressed. They weren't really doing too much, but they also didn't feel too much stress. But then they started working with these at-risk young adults, and they did report that their stress levels went up. But in parallel to that, what they saw was increases in the size of the structure in the brain called the hippocampus. That's really important for formation, not so much recall, but formation of new memories. So some level of stress is actually really good for you. We have a colleague at Penn State, David Almeida is his name. He tends to do research on chronic stress in thousands and thousands of people. So he does what are called these public health-based studies. So he'll give out a survey to 100,000 people. And what he has found consistently in his research, that people who report really low levels of stress are the ones who have the most cognitive difficulties. So it's not that all stress is bad for you. So stress has been found to play an adaptive role as well. It's when you are unable to cope with the demands of the stress and you are chronically feeling the physiological response of the stress in your body, that's when it leads to cardiovascular health issues, that's when it leads to other issues. So it really is about, and we'll probably get into these questions, but it really is about your perspective on stress and your belief if stress is harmful or not.
So this is really fascinating. So, okay, acute stress, car's coming, adrenaline, jump back so the car doesn't hit you. chronic stress, kind of multiple versions. Some of it can lead you to have better brain function, right? I mean, so a little bit of stress over a consistent period of time might actually be a good thing to help your brain stay alert, wired, and recall and all these things. But then too much of it, like how does it switch from that to a little bit of chronic stress being good to all of a sudden it's there way too long, and now you mentioned hypertension and all these other disorders that clearly aren't good for us?
Actually, I'm going to tell you another really interesting fact about this research. So it's not that there is this linear relation or like this inverted U, right? Like too little is bad, moderate is good, and then high is bad for you again. But the one factor that really plays a critical role is your belief is stress harmful for you? So this was a study that was done in over 80,000 individuals, and they followed them for about 8 years or so. And they asked them, in the last year, how stressed were you? And then the second question that they asked them was stress, do you think that stress is harmful for you? So of course, individuals who had a very high level of stress also had high cardiovascular health issues, but only if they believed that the stress was harmful for them. So your belief about the stress really matters. And there's been this really incredible line of research within health psychology that seems to suggest that if you think that your stress is a natural part of who we are as humans and you have the resources to cope with it, and even if your heart is pounding, right? I'm here giving a talk with all of you, my boss is right here, and so I could be really stressed about it, but I have learned to say, you know what, this heart pounding is actually a good thing for me. That is telling me that I am really engaged in this conversation. I am really present in this moment. And stress takes on a different meaning for you. Now, that's not true for all kinds of stress, right? There's work stress, there is family stress, there's societal stress. We've talked about the election as well. There are certain, and so I don't want to just set aside all stress and say it's just within our belief system. There are real pressures and real stressors that a lot of us are facing and will be facing in the next 4 years as well. So it's important to recognize that that is happening, but in terms of some of the things that we can control, one of our beliefs is if we start learning and working with that, stress is innate to us as humans, and it's not necessarily harmful, and work with that shift in mindset can be pretty instrumental.
So just to be clear, you unpack stress. While this won't solve all of it, how we as individuals perceive and decide if that stress is really, really bad for us or just kind of to get us okay, but we have a belief system around it, not for everything, but for some things that could change outcomes. Absolutely. So you literally can think things to a positive outcome from a stress perspective for some things.
Absolutely. And that study that I was talking about, people who believed that stress was not harmful to them, they actually did the best in that study. Yeah. They had the high, you could have really high levels of stress, but if you thought that the stress was not harmful for you, now it's easier said than done, right? I've been practicing mindfulness since 2009, and I feel like I'm slowly coming to this. So it's easier said than done in terms of the shift in that mindset, but that's an important coping strategy that we all can develop and work with.